They said France would beg for a deal. They said French exporters would storm the Élysée Palace if Britain left the single market. They said Paris would tremble while London roared into a new golden age. But now it's 2025, and when you look at the numbers, the sectors, the GDP curves, the bilateral trade volumes, the shifting labor markets, and the post-Brexit fallout, you realize very quickly that those bold predictions didn't just age badly, they collapsed under the weight of empirical reality and economic inertia. So let's ask the only question that still matters in this context of grand illusions and collapsed expectations. How hard has Brexit hit France compared to Great Britain, and is there even a comparison left to make that doesn't end in awkward silence? Let's start where the evidence is most brutal, on the British side of the channel. The Office for Budget Responsibility, a British institution and not a Brussels propaganda outlet, concluded that the UK's long-term productivity had shrunk by 4% compared to where it would have been if the UK had remained in the European Union. A drop that has left permanent scars on the national economy and no easy way back to pre-Brexit trajectories. And Cambridge Econometrics reported that the UK economy by 2023 was approximately £140 billion smaller than it would have been without Brexit, a number so immense it defies easy analogies, though some have likened it to erasing the entire economic output of a major British city. The Bank of England supported these assessments with forecasts of sustained GDP contraction from mid-22 until at least mid-2024, not as a speculative fear, but as a projected certainty baked into their policy outlooks. Overall, the combined long-term cost to the UK economy is estimated to lie somewhere between 5 and 10% of total GDP, an economic cliff the UK did not fall from, but rather leapt off while waving a Union Jack. And when it comes to trade, the data offers no comfort. Between 21 and 23, British exports to the EU nosedived by 27%, while imports from the EU sank by 32%, the results not of random fluctuation but of customs declarations, regulatory barriers, disrupted supply chains, and businesses simply given up on continental engagement. For many British firms, it became easier to abandon Europe than to deal with the new reality of checks, forms, inspections, and the loss of automatic market access. Then we come to the labor market. By 2023, Britain had approximately 2 million fewer jobs than it would have had if it had remained within the EU framework. The sectors most affected were construction, transport, and financial services, all areas that once relied on a fluid and mobile European workforce, now largely absent due to new immigration rules and residency restrictions. Some studies predict that this job deficit could grow to 3 million by 2035, a staggering figure that is often softened in public discourses but cannot be denied in serious economic modeling. Add to this the continued depreciation of the pound against the euro, the rising costs of imported goods, increased inflation, and investor uncertainty, and it becomes clear that Brexit wasn't just an event, it was a systemic rupture. And a self-inflicted one. And now let's turn to France. Was France hit? Yes, of course. Was the damage comparable? Absolutely not. In 2019, the United Kingdom was France's sixth largest customer for goods exports and its eighth largest source of imports. It was also the second most important country for both service exports and imports, mainly due to tourism and transportation. After Brexit, France saw export losses to the UK estimated at between £1.9 billion and £3.2 billion annually, depending on the calculation model and the year considered. Sectors like agriculture, automotive manufacturing and fisheries were visibly affected, especially as France's fishing fleets lost regular access to British waters in some cases, with operators reporting cost increases of up to 30%. However, France managed to balance these losses through growth elsewhere. Exports to the rest of the EU surged by over 30%, more than compensating for the shortfall in UK-bound trade. France redirected its trade flows, consolidating EU supply chains, and leaned more heavily into continental trade, which remains free of the barriers that now plague UK-EU commerce. Tourism also bounced back. By 2022, British tourists were returning in droves, and the French services sector, especially hospitality and transport, benefited strongly from their return, helping to offset earlier losses in services trade. And while Britain's finance industry worried about job losses, well, Paris took action. With the loss of passporting rights, UK-based financial institutions could no longer serve EU clients without relocation. France responded with a targeted campaign to attract them to Paris. Specialized support teams, tax incentives, regulatory clarity, and active promotion, they all paid off. By 22, at least 2,800 new finance jobs have been created in the French capital, reinforcing its status as a serious European financial hub. The French government even launched bilingual bureaucratic fast tracks for high-value international professionals and made changes to residency procedures for relocated staff. Major firms such as JP Morgan Chase, Goldman Sachs, and HSBC expanded their presence in Paris, with ripple effects for legal services, fintech, and luxury real estate. And meanwhile, British firms spent millions navigating the labyrinth of duplicated compliance procedures for accessing the EU market, an issue their French counterparts never had to face. Quantitatively, the disparity is unmissable. The UK suffered up to a 10% GDP loss. France, by comparison, experienced an estimated 0.1 percentage point reduction in national wealth due to Brexit in 2021. French exports to the UK remained flat, while British exports to the EU, you could say they plummeted. And France created thousands of jobs in finance. The UK lost millions across core sectors. And while the average Briton in 2023 was calculated to be £2,000 poorer than they would have been in a no-Brexit scenario, no similar drop in per capita wealth was reported for France. The reasons for this asymmetry are not ideological, they are structural. The United Kingdom had been deeply embedded in the mechanisms of the EU single market and customs union. France, by contrast, was merely trading with a neighbor. When Brexit happened, the UK had to rebuild institutional and legal frameworks from scratch, while France simply had to adjust some export routes and paperwork. Currency also played a role. The UK's pound suffered from volatility and loss of investor confidence. France, protected by the Eurozone, enjoyed monetary stability. But perhaps the most important difference was strategic. France saw Brexit as a geopolitical and economic event that created opportunities as well as risks. Rather than mourn the loss of a key trading partner, France moved swiftly to secure its interests, reinforce its integration in the EU, and reposition itself in sectors where London's departure left gaps. It took a moment of continental chaos and reframed it as a chance to reassert its role as a core European powerhouse. The French state offered fiscal support for businesses exposed to UK trade and expanded training programs for customs agents and regulatory personnel to smooth the transition. It increased diplomatic coordination with Ireland, the Netherlands, and Germany to safeguard supply chain resilience and protect EU-wide economic networks. Even in the wine sector, French producers diversified export destinations to Asia and North America in response to uncertainties caused by Brexit. And the same goes for automotive parts. Several French manufacturers reported improved efficiency by reshoring elements of production from the UK back into the EU customs zone. Brexit for France was never a blessing, but it became a stress test that the French economy passed with relative confidence. And the end result? France was bruised. The UK was battered. France adjusted. The UK is still adjusting. France, yes, had losses. The UK is still counting them. France remained anchored in a powerful trade bloc. The UK is floating alone with trade deals that often mimic EU agreements but lack their leverage. This wasn't a duel between two economic equals, it was a separation, and only one partner came out the other side without serious injury.